The dark alleys of beginning. It was late at night. The city slept under a blanket of silence, broken only by the barking of stray dogs and the distant echo of a passing car. Ibrahim Traoré sat on an old wooden chair, staring at his hands. They were rough, scarred, and lined with years of struggle. But hidden within them was the power to carve a new future. He came from the poorest corners of the neighborhood. Empty pockets, unpaid school fees, worn-out shoes, and the daily sting of hunger were not strangers to him. They were his companions. Yet deep inside, there was a burning voice whispering, "This is not where you stop. You were not born just to survive. You were born to fight, to rise." From childhood, Ibrahim had seen the harsh face of poverty. He had tasted nights when dinner was just a glass of water, mornings when walking to school barefoot was normal, and days when teachers questioned if he even belonged in class. But instead of breaking him, these moments carved steel into his spirit. He wanted more, not just for himself, but for his family, for his people. One evening, as his friends sat on the street corner complaining about fate, Ibrahim stood up and said firmly, "Fate might be written, but the pen is in my hands. I will write my own story." Those words became the first turning point in his life. From then on, Ibrahim decided that no matter how heavy life's storms got, he would not let them crush him. He would take every wound as a lesson and every setback as a stepping stone. He began with small steps. At dawn, he delivered newspapers around the neighborhood. In the afternoons, he picked up odd jobs just to keep food on the table. At night, while others slept, he sat under the dim streetlight studying books borrowed from whoever was kind enough to lend them. People laughed at him. "This guy thinks delivering newspapers will make him a leader someday," they mocked. But Ibrahim didn't argue. He just smiled and whispered to himself, "Laugh now. Tomorrow you'll see." That silent determination became his fire. A fire not fueled by ego, but by hope. Not only for himself, but for everyone trapped in the darkness he knew too well. This was just the beginning of his journey, the beginning of a boy who refused to bow down to circumstances, a young man who believed that even from the darkest alleys, light can be born. The weight of struggle. The sun rose over the dusty streets, painting the horizon with shades of gold and red. For most people, it was just another ordinary morning. But for Ibrahim, every sunrise was a reminder, you have one more chance to push forward. Life didn't get easier as he grew older. It got heavier. His responsibilities multiplied. His mother's tired eyes, his siblings' empty plates, the whispers of neighbors mocking his family's condition. All of it pressed down on him like a mountain. But instead of crushing him, that weight forged him. He knew that complaining wouldn't change a thing. Action was the only language life understood, so he worked harder. Some days he carried bricks at construction sites, his hands bleeding from the rough edges. Other days, he helped shopkeepers unload supplies just to earn a few coins. At night, when exhaustion threatened to drown him, he opened his notebooks, fighting sleep to learn a few more pages. And in those quiet hours, as the streetlights flickered above him, he whispered to himself, "I don't want to escape my reality. I want to transform it." But the road was brutal. There were times when he failed exams despite his effort. Times when he was rejected from opportunities because of where he came from. Times when he felt invisible. And yet, every failure added to his strength. Every rejection became proof that he could endure. Because endurance, Ibrahim believed, was the seed of greatness. One evening, after a long day of labor, a friend asked him, "Why don't you just give up? Why break your back for nothing?" Ibrahim looked at him, sweat dripping from his face, and answered with a calm but unshakable tone, "Because giving up doesn't feed my family, and it doesn't feed my soul." That answer silenced everyone around him. For the first time, they realized Ibrahim was not chasing a dream for glory. He was carrying a mission. Slowly, his persistence began to inspire others. Younger kids in the neighborhood started looking at him differently. They saw a boy who refused to bow down, a fighter who turned pain into fuel. Leadership doesn't begin with speeches or power. It begins in the silent moments, when you decide to keep going while others stop. And Ibrahim was living proof of that. Every day of struggle was shaping him into something greater. His back grew stronger under the weight of labor, his mind sharper under the weight of books, and his heart braver under the weight of disappointment. He was no longer just surviving, he was transforming. Step by step, day by day, pain by pain. And deep inside he knew, if I can carry this weight without breaking, then one day I will carry the weight of a nation. The rise of a voice. By the time Ibrahim entered his 20s, the streets that once mocked him had begun to respect him. He was no longer just the boy who delivered newspapers or carried bricks. He was the young man who refused to give up. People began to notice the way he carried himself, with a rare mix of humility and fire. But respect doesn't come without resistance. As Ibrahim pursued higher education, he realized the system around him was deeply broken. Corruption rotted its core. Opportunities weren't given to those who worked hard. They were handed to those with power, money, or connections. For many, this reality was suffocating. They accepted it as the way things are. But Ibrahim couldn't. His soul rebelled against injustice. One day, in a crowded hall, a group of students complained about unfair treatment. Most voices faded into silence, but Ibrahim's voice cut through the air with clarity. If we stay silent, we are part of the problem. If we want change, we must become the change. The room fell silent. For the first time, students heard a voice that wasn't just angry. It was fearless, steady, and hopeful. That moment marked the birth of a leader. Soon, more students began gathering around him. They saw in Ibrahim not just a friend, but a guide, a mirror of what they wished they could be. He taught them that courage was not about being fearless, but about standing tall, even when fear tried to hold you down. But leadership came at a cost. Speaking against corruption made him a target. He faced threats, intimidation, and even betrayal from people he thought were allies. Yet, each attempt to silence him only made his voice louder. Late at night, when doubt crept in, he would sit alone and ask himself, "Why me? Why this burden?" And then he would remember his mother's tired eyes, his people's hunger, and his own childhood struggles. That memory would light his fire again. "This is not just about me," he told himself. "This is about everyone who has been told they are too small to matter." With every rally, every speech, every risk, Ibrahim grew stronger. He was no longer just surviving the weight of life. He was lifting others with him. He reminded them that they too had a voice. One evening, after addressing a restless crowd, a young boy tugged at his shirt and said softly, "Mr. Ibrahim, when I grow up, I want to be like you." That moment struck him harder than any threat could. He realized the truth. Leadership wasn't about power, titles, or fame. It was about planting hope in the hearts of others. From then on, Ibrahim's fight wasn't just for justice. It was for the belief that no matter how dark life gets, one courageous voice can light 1,000 more. And deep within, he knew his journey had only just begun.
The world takes notice. The boy who once carried newspapers on broken streets was no longer just a dreamer. He had become a force, a voice, a symbol of resistance. Ibrahim Traoré's rise wasn't written in comfort. It was forged in hardship, in sacrifice, and in relentless courage. His people saw him as hope. But soon, the world began to see him as a challenge. When Ibrahim stood before international leaders for the first time, he didn't walk in with fear. He walked in with the same fire that carried him through every rejection, every hunger-filled night, and every battle for justice. He was young, but he spoke with the weight of generations behind him. Across the table sat men who had ruled the global stage for decades, leaders of powerful nations, presidents, and businessmen who shaped economies with a pen stroke. Among them were figures like Donald Trump, who had become symbols of bold, unapologetic power, while Ibrahim did not flinch, while others negotiated for wealth or influence. Ibrahim spoke of dignity, of freedom, of justice. He reminded the world that leadership was not about towers of gold, but about lifting people out of the dust. Some laughed at him, some dismissed him as too young, others tried to silence him with political pressure. But just as in his childhood, every attempt to break him only fueled him more. He began to challenge the old order openly, asking questions no one dared to ask. Why should nations with endless resources remain poor, while the rich grow richer? Why must our voices, Be silent so your systems remain unshaken. These words echoed far beyond the conference rooms. They spread across borders, lighting a spark in hearts that had long given up hope. Ibrahim was no longer just a leader of his people, he was becoming a symbol for anyone, anywhere, who felt crushed under injustice, and that is where his true power lay. He wasn't simply standing against presidents, billionaires, or international giants. He was standing for something greater, for the belief that the future does not belong to those who hoard power. It belongs to those who dare to dream and fight for it. When the world saw him side by side with global leaders, they didn't just see a young man from Burkina Faso. They saw courage in its purest form. They saw someone who proved that you don't need money, privilege, or legacy to change the world. You need fire, faith, and the will to keep moving when everyone else gives up. And as Ibrahim once whispered to himself under a flickering streetlight, he now declared before the world, "The pen is still in my hands, and I will write not just my story, but the story of my people, and the story of a new world." The boy who was once told he was too small to matter was now writing a chapter that no one could ignore. His journey was not over, it had only begun. Because Ibrahim Traoré had proven one timeless truth: greatness does not come from where you start. Greatness comes from never stopping until the world listens.